say who you are?
I'm Sonia.
She's a part-time SENSORICA member, and we live together. And she's a psychologist, right? And my name is Tibi. Most of you know me. I work with other people, building SENSORICA, and work on the Open Value network. You want to present yourself, Bob, me, and Apostolis?
Are you sure that they're hearing us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we.
Hello.
I can hear. Hi, Apostolos. You want to go?
No, you go.
So Bob can't hear very well. Bob and I work on the value accounting software, network resource planning software that SENSORICA is using. We're developing it in partnership with them. And John, I think we have a lot of agreement with you on what you said before the meeting formally started.
Oh, okay. I didn't know anyone was listening.
Just letting you know.
Right.
Okay, I'm muting.
I just wanted to pop in for a second. I'm an old man. My ears don't work very well, and I'm not being able to understand what people say. I'm happy that Lynn is able to do so, and then so I'm going to drop out and let our bandwidth go to Lynn, and she can tell me stories afterwards. Sorry about that. Bye.
Bye, Bob.
Hello, my name is Apostolis. I've been a math student, and I've studied electrical engineering in the past for a few years. And well, that's all. I really like programming and mathematics. So, and I'm really interested in economics from. And I started being interested in economics from 2008, where we had the economic crisis. So that's it from me. It's a bit late for me right now in Greece, so I'm just going to listen what you have to say. Okay, bye.
Thanks. So what do we want to do with these events? Any ideas that can come up? The structure that we thought about this event today, if we had more people, was basically to watch a video and provide some information to newcomers that are probably new to peer-to-peer. Let them absorb this information, then have a sort of a facilitated discussion to better define certain concepts for them. And then the idea was to move into a free discussion, perhaps in groups, where people can contextualize these ideas, relating them to their own lives and experiences and workplace. And in the end, what we wanted to do was, if somebody has a problem that I wanted to bring a peer-to-peer solution to it, we can meet again, and then it becomes a problem-solving sort of event or gathering. I can think of some new startups that would like to go the open way, and they don't know how to make their first steps. I can think of a group of artists that want to go the peer-to-peer way, or want to maybe even start to produce content about peer-to-peer and vehiculate some of these ideas. I don't know if we have to focus this on economy per se. We're very close to SENSORICA, but I think this is a large.
I'll go first, I guess, also because I told Tiberius I wasn't going to hang around a lot tonight. I have a little boy with me, and it's a beautiful evening out there, so I think these kinds of meetings are essential, but I am going to leave fairly quickly. But I'll try to offer, I often get criticized for offering too high-level view or abstract perspectives, but I'll try to synthesize some of what I'm thinking of coming from prior to my middle years in corporations as a management consultant. I was a pretty idealistic, hippie in the late 60s and early 70s, and of course we're probably going back to those notions now. But there's a lot, things are happening in waves now, and they're happening in waves relatively quickly where, for example, peer-to-peer commons-based issues was seen as extremely marginal, if not weird hippie shit, 2 or 3 years ago, to something that's increasingly getting some forms of consideration, and people are looking for practical ways of doing it. Along with that, I would combine something I think we'll probably see in my lifetime, which I think is important, which is, Western world countries having to seriously consider guaranteed annual income programs and policies for a variety of reasons, of which I won't go into now in terms of believing that. But I think one of the things that's a challenge for peer-to-peer now, and this is really how I met Tiberius, it's also, it turns out he knew Michel Bovens, I know Michel Bovens, a number of other people. There was recently in Italy a young group of students whose art and design and architecture school was threatened by cuts, and lo and behold, one day I got a note, an email saying they had decided to take some things into their own hands, create something called the Near Future of Education Lab, and use a concept called hierarchy that I've been working on for about 15 years as an organizing principle from which to generate issues like organizational design and governance and so on. What we're seeing happening now is we're transitioning from about 50 years where there was essentially one homogeneous model of hierarchy applied to, let's call it the modern organization and modern business models, to an increasing series of different but similar and related patterns of organizing based on hyperlinks, where people are gathering on purpose to address a problem or an issue or a subject. And this is, I think, the inherent organizing pattern of peer-to-peer. Now, going back to the homogeneous hierarchical way, one of the things that's become embedded in people's pretty deep psychology is the notion of jobs, salaries, and all of the protocol, policies, and practices that go around that. And one of the things I've been very encouraged by, both by Tiberius's work and a fellow that I've introduced, and I think Bob and Lynn, you've been involved in a couple of the email threads, is in order for people to start taking seriously the move to peer-to-peer and a more fluid and more temporary sort of arrangement of organizations that come and go as problems get solved and issues get addressed, is to have something that's going to replace the job. Because a lot of people aren't going to either be able to cognitively or want to emotively make the transition to a more open and flowing kind of life, and they're really used to, and all of society is set up to deal with a regular inflow of a certain amount of cash every 2 weeks or every month. And the more and more the peer-to-peer movement focuses on practical measures that can be shown to work, that help people make a living, because we haven't done away with money yet, and alternative currencies aren't strong enough yet. We need those things, otherwise people will keep resisting for a wide variety and a wide range of reasons. And so I think that it was very heartening for me to see. I like Ethos's way of going about things. I understand it a little bit better, but I haven't spent as much time trying to understand the value accounting network you folks are putting together. Who knows if those end up being the perfect models or not, or whether there end up being variations that are context defined and context designed for different forms of organizations that have different purposes. But those are the kinds of things that are necessary for any greater number of people to say, yes, I'm willing to at least take a chance on working and operating in a peer-to-peer world. I think as well that the peer-to-peer philosophy in general is very appealing to a lot of people that know that the world is, pick your word, rotten, corrupt, fucked up, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that's interesting to me at the moment is I'm starting to work with some of the residents of the some of the people involved at the Buckminster Fuller Institute, whose motto or his ultimate vision slogan was to make the world 100% something for make the world viable or useful for 100% of humanity with no damage to the ecosystem and something else in a sustainable way. I happen to know that there's a number of plans here in Montreal. It will very soon be the 50th anniversary of Expo 67. We have the beautiful biosphere that Fuller built, and earlier today I was talking with an elderly man who's my collaborator who actually worked with Buckminster Fuller on the development of the plans for the biosphere here in Montreal. So, and I found something the other day that Buckminster Fuller said that philosophy is useless unless it finds mechanical application. And so we need to find ways, for example, to replace salaried jobs with ways of making a living in peer-to-peer organizations, which is something I think, if I understand correctly, Bob and Lynn, you are working on. Sorry for talking so long.
No, I have some question for you, John, because we had a chance to meet a few times and discuss, but I don't know if somebody else from the web has a question. 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. I'll go for it then. So we've been very active engaging local traditional institutions. We've been working with the SEDEC, where we have some relations with the Fondation du Maire, La Chambre de Commerce.
Yes.
We've been talking to a few consortiums like CRIAC, mostly, and so we have this experience over these 4 years engaging classical institutions and trying to establish some forms of collaboration. And we had a lot of problems, mostly problems of interface. Now, when I'm thinking about this event and having some discussions in the future and information, I'm also thinking about solving some problems. See, so why I've noticed that a lot of people respond very positively to what we do, but when it comes down to sit down and do the work, you have serious interfacing problems. We need a letter from Sensorica to commit to this. These kind of things where you have two cultures, two set of processes that don't match.
Well, it's a very clear mental models issue for me. Both as a management consultant, as a coach, and observer of what's gone on over the last 30 years. There's a term that came into being about 15 to 20 years ago that then became commonplace, and it's indicative of today's culture, in my opinion, particularly in the, let's call it the mainstream world for the sake of this conversation, and how deeply models have to change. The phrase, "what's in it for me?" became absolutely prevalent everywhere. When you're suggesting something new to somebody, or that they do something or take up an initiative, people have been trained to ask what the first question, well, why should I do that? What's in it for me? Mm-hmm. As opposed to what's in it for us. There we go.
Yeah, so, well, the things you both said rose up some ideas in my head. Basically, for the last 2 years, I've been interested in the gamification processes, in companies. I've noticed that there's basically two, it branches into two philosophies. One which is more behavioristic, another one which is more revolving around the self-determination theory. So, and the later is the most interesting, pertaining to the subject of this conversation, because I think, thinking in terms of shifting the mental frame, of the actual mental framework. One thing that might be used as a lever is the self-determination theory. The fact that some individuals involve themselves, give some time and energy into a project, and they don't see what's gonna happen next, or they don't affects the feeling of progression that they have getting involved in there. So if we can generate a feeling of progression somehow, it motivates people in the longer term. So,
so there have always been people whose philosophical leanings and orientation have motivated them to contribute, to direct their energies and efforts towards the greater good, and I think there always will be. However, we live in a pretty individualistic, narcissistic me culture. I'm, by and large, very against the gamification in organizations and in the workplace. I understand well the two theories. The second one is nice, but that would demand a very, very healthy, in quotation marks, organizational culture and leadership philosophy for the organization if it were to become reality. But I think in at least 9 out of 10 cases it would be the former, which is some form of seeking to motivate employees by some form of providing incentives. Now, on the other hand, on a more philosophical level, I believe very, very much in ludic principles of serious play belonging, having a more central place in work in general. People that enjoy what they're doing and enjoy the people they're doing it with are very often playful, and get a lot done there. But we live in a workplace that has been defined by slogans and labels for the last 20 years. I mean, I worked as a consultant in one of the big global firms and did a lot of this work, which is why I'm a renegade now, because it went against who I am and my beliefs and values, and it was very traumatic for me to quit. I think I was telling Tiberius, I earned a lot less money subsequently and underwent a depression because I wasn't sure who I was, and so on. But we're at the end of a 30-year period of trying all sorts of forms of incentive. It's not a verb, of offering incentives of different forms to people. There's a very important book that was written about 20 years ago by a fellow named Alfie Kohn called "Punished by Rewards." That is it's a seminal book on providing incentives to workers and students and all sorts of stuff. But we live in a culture where measurement and offering incentives, behaviorism a la Skinner, have just become almost seen as the natural order of things, and that's what the peer-to-peer movement is up against. I believe many people say, I'm not completely sure, but because I remember how idealistic myself and my cohort were, and then they all got mortgages and easy credit and changed. But today's younger generation, I think, sees through a lot of this and sees that it has had essentially much more destructive than constructive effect on our world. Which is why peer-to-peer kinds of things should hurry up and get more practical so that more people can do them.
Okay. I see two trends here. Like I hear discussing, and I see one thing is how do people can accommodate more to peer-to-peer culture, peer-to-peer practices and processes. So that is a process of integration, basically. How do we get more people to get to what we do, and how do we help them to do it well, in order for us as a whole, right, as a community, to become more effective. But I also want to leave on the table the problem that we were facing, which is build bridges with the old world, where the resources are. Okay, and I've been doing that very actively and very intensively for the last 2 years, trying to build relationships to get grants, to get access to academic labs to do our job, students, and so on. So, I think we identified here two major problems that we have, right? And we feel that every day. People that come in don't have the culture, don't know how to collaborate. Are yes sir people? What's in it for me? We see that every day.
There's a huge marketing challenge as well, because people, you think of your average person, by the time they hit 25 or 30, they've been socialized to follow the rules and do things right to get good grades, to get credentials, to get a job, get a good job, get a mortgage, to function in the world the way it's structured today. I'm probably one of the last of the generations where I recognized only a couple of years after I graduated from university in 1975 that students started getting a lot more studious and doing their work and stuff. But there was a period from 65 to 75 where studied and did the work and stuff, but there was a lot of frisbee and music and freedom and all sorts of stuff. Didn't mean you didn't think, didn't mean you didn't get an education. But then students it's become much more factory-like, and there's been a mantra of efficiency by all sorts of management consultants and business gurus. Not only that, but the worlds of NGOs, religion, and anything other than the business world has also become businessified in terms of you have to make business cases for things, you have to justify things, you have to show a return, you have to have a budget and so on. Now, those are the conditions that we're in today. When I say it's a marketing issue, one of the things, you're probably to some degree immersed in the peer-to-peer world and philosophy, and I think I understand it, but for the average person out on the street there, peer-to-peer says two things. It's a bunch of marginal hippies, kind of, but not only that, but it's mostly geek stuff, as opposed to the sociology and the psychology and the philosophy and those issues. And there's an enormous amount of education to do. Now, I think that's starting with some of the books that are pushing back, because people also, when I say that, are also aware that capitalism is the giant vampire squid on the face of humanity. That's a line from Matt Taibbi, in case you never read that, but it's a wonderful one. It's sucking everything out of life. And people are starting to become aware of that and are scared of that and want an alternative and realize that, in a sense, our societies operate in rules that have been made up by people. We can make new rules. But there's a marketing challenge, a big marketing challenge to peer-to-peer, not only to show that things can operate, but how you describe it and how you talk about it.
I think there's also a learning experience for us, again, trying to project these kind of discussions. Because some things that you're saying, I see that they're not even part of our culture. The SENSORICA's model is also heavily based on measuring contributions and generating, extrinsic motivation, meaning tangible rewards, right?
Those are your alternatives to job descriptions at the moment. That's your form of a job description at the moment. Right now in the other world, as you know, you apply for a job, you get interviewed, you get a job, you sign a few documents, including registration into a benefit plan, maybe after the probation period, and you start getting a check every two weeks or every month, depending upon the plan. You've essentially signed a contract, and you get measured in different ways through a performance objective because the incentive is to get an annual increase and so on. You don't have those mechanisms in a peer-to-peer environment. Instead, you have what you just described. That's what I mean by it's a replacement or an alternative to a job description.
But what I'm trying to say is that we also do something. Maybe some part of our practices today they're not aligned with fully aligned with some new philosophies.
When you say our, are you talking about SENSORICA?
SENSORICA.
Because as I mentioned, for example, I've just become involved with Ethos, and you've gone back and forth, and you've read their value accounting,
value exchange
thing. So there's not a job description, but there's a negotiated value exchange document, VED. It's only one page, and it spells out the terms and stuff, and that comes after discussion between me and Robert Pye of the kinds of things that I can provide of value to their network. And then in the online personal store that they have, there will be ongoing recordings of, not unlike your tangible contributions thing, of times when I'm, part of my role is to provide connections to people like you or to Michelle Bovins or to a lot of people. I have a big network, some of whom I'll introduce because they'll be interested philosophically, some of whom I won't introduce because they won't be interested philosophically. And then I also have contributions Robert and I have agreed that are of value, that are with respect to my understandings and my observations about organizational structures, organizational dynamics. I'll probably help them on some consulting projects because they actually have projects with different cities in the UK and so on. So there's a one-page thing. There's no paragraphs on it that describe my duties, but if you read it down, you get a sense of what kind of contribution I'm making and what I'm receiving as well in return as the promise, which is some kind of shares in a certain kind of legal entity.
And there's a lot of negotiation, right? There's a huge subjective.
It's a two-way
Yeah.
negotiation between two adults. It's not a
Okay.
boss saying you're hired and now you're
Mhm.
you're one of the people I tell what to do.
Mhm. Yeah.
This ethos project, similar to, I think it was called Ethereum, where they were taking like the same concept as a Bitcoin.
No, that's
to
no.
okay.
Ethos is something else. Ethereum, it's a new thing that
Yeah.
everybody's freaking out about. Yeah. I can send you links to Ethos if you are studying what they have a few documents. I don't think everything is public, right? Ethos,
No.
but some.
No,
If you
but-
know the website.
Well, we'll see, but it's no, it's not. Ethereum is. I think that article I sent to you, right, about Ethereum. And then it's sort of like a new blockchain
Mhm.
kind of thing. No, the two different things.
Yeah.
I also heard I don't know if you remember Jamie Klinger, like the,
Yeah, sure.
So he's got a project called Joatu.
Joatu, yes. Yeah, I follow him. Yeah.
Seems,
Actually, I meet I meet Jamie more than I meet you
yeah.
because we see each other at different events and he's very active with this project. It's a guy here in Montreal, also a fellow from Occupy. He's studying an alternative currency, basically community-based currency.
I think there's going to be lots of different projects and all sorts of different. I'm already aware of probably 20 over the last 5 years. There'll probably end up being hundreds, lots of them local. I mean, nobody can predict the future if the price of oil continues to go up, or if it turns out, as I believe, that fracking is relatively short term and so on, or there's any kinds of significant upset in the world, then it won't take very long for lots of economies and become a lot more local than they are today. For sure. In which case, all bets are off in terms of alternative and local currencies.
You want to say something?
No, I think for me, it's this whole open culture is still very new. So I'm trying to just take, because I'm noticing every time we talk how much I'm formed by the old economy.
But that's a nice case, right? Because you're somebody that wants to learn and
Yeah.
but it's
finds it difficult to navigate through, right?
So I'm trying to just kind of listen to it and let it sink in and see what it comes up. I think it's also in terms of openness. I guess for science, I work in neuroscience. There it's easier. It's not happening. There's a lot of what's in it for me and impact factors and publishing. That's a lot of pressure. In therapy, I think it's very difficult because of confidentiality issues with clients that you can't be open. You can be open with your colleagues and peers, but that's happening, I think, quite a lot. But it's not really directly applicable to me.
I think there are different. It's very reminiscent of a conversation I had earlier about transparency, where I'm part of a consulting network which is supposed to be fully open and transparent, and the founder of it was sort of complaining because we had a private conversation the other day where myself and another of the, let's say, maybe more prominent members were saying this isn't working very well, and here are some of the reasons. And so then the founder, she came back to me today and said, well, the conversation that we had was very, very useful, and so we're rethinking a lot of things, but it was held in private in a back channel, which is against our philosophy of transparency. And I said, well, I would really suggest you think about what you just said a lot more, because transparency doesn't mean walking around in the nude all the time in front of everybody. What is important and transparent is that the reason for the conversation and a summary of the things discussed and the actions that may come of it is disclosed to everybody in the community, and that is transparency, and you will be in integrity. But that, in any society, anywhere, the most intentional of open communities, you're still going to have private conversations at times. So, in terms of what you're saying, there are varying degrees of what we mean by open. and yet it's a word that is a bit of a motherhood word like we should be open, so we should be open. Well, yes, but, or yes, and so and it's critical issues. You know, the reason there's therapy and organizational development and so on, and it takes, I believe, and you know, this is kind of maybe me being egocentric, but it takes many, many years to understand the degree of deep structure and rigidification that exists in society today as a result of layer after layer after layer of codification. We don't, you know, there's a reason, for example, in your field, and I'm simplifying vastly here, people have 40, you know, the 40-year-old midlife crisis. More recently, there's research showing that there's a kind of a crisis every 10 years, starting at about 25 and going on. But that's because, you know, you get placed into these structures and processes when you're, you know, like him next September when he first goes to school. And you have authority figures telling you to do your homework, to be like this, to act like this. Not only that, but there's a vision held out in front of you, which is if you follow the rules, get a good education, become a good person, you'll have a good career, you'll have an interesting job, you'll have a good life, you know, and so on and so forth. And then, and you know, by and large, you follow that, and two things happen when you hit, you know, roughly 35. You start to wonder a little bit, because that's when you start bumping into what are called the messy, wicked challenges of adult life. And you see around you that some people that aren't nearly as nice as you or haven't followed the rules are roaring successes, and you may have followed all the rules and been really nice, and you're not happy, or you're doing things that you were asked to make choices when you were 22 or 25 or 30 that turned out to be the wrong choices for your soul, your personality, your psychology. So you have these, you know, it's like me. I mean, I worked my ass off to become a senior consultant and then a partner in a big global consulting firm. And I hit 40 and I was offered partnership. I was in London, and 3 weeks later I quit. You know, I didn't sleep for 3 weeks, and I kept asking myself, who am I and do I believe in this? And the answer was always no. And I said, well, I can either accept this, which means a life of quiet desperation for the next 25 years, or I can, you know, turn around and walk out. And I turned around and walked out. And I'm a lot poorer now, but I'm a lot happier, right? So, you know, and every single person we meet has their own version of that path. And that's one of the things that's great about the internet, because there's a lot of sharing of those perspectives, and there's more awareness of the effects of much of the life in which we live, and how it is, you know, presses in on us often, and also the opportunities for, you know, doing differently and being who you are. And, you know, writ large, that's the opportunity for the peer-to-peer movement. I think there's also a lot of idealism in the peer-to-peer movement, because I think that it's, you know, even being in connection with a lot of other adults with the same philosophy and same values doesn't mean it's automatically going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's going to be nice. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be friendly. You know, coming together to actually share in a very meaningful way a vision that can be made operative is really hard work, and involves conflict and friction and all sorts of stuff. And all of that is just an opinion. You know, I'm an opinionated person.
Did you add something?
Well, basically the themes you spoke about is something I've encountered when I was with UTV, because at first I was elected on the board of directors to implement a more horizontal structure, and we found ourselves in a situation where we're pointed out for not being transparent enough, and in the end, the way we were able to resolve these situations was by putting on all the resume, all the notes from the meetings online, make sure everybody was able to access it, and making town hall meetings where we would debate and discuss the themes on which we were making decisions afterwards, sending notes about that to all the members. So it was a tedious process, to get that going on.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
Tiberius, did you want to check with Lynn or in case there have any questions or what?
I just wrote a message there. Feel free
Okay.
to jump in, and I think Lynn, she knows the culture and apostolics, they would jump in. It's not the first talk that we have.
I'm going to head out pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, no, well, I would just like to add something to this conversation, because there's something in the air here, and I think it's going to be useful for us in the next events. There's this misperception, actually, that because I am doing something that requires secrecy, because I have a certain type of relationship with my client, a doctor, a psychologist, a lawyer, right? It doesn't apply to open practices or to peer-to-peer. What I realize here is that, yes, your relation with your patient, you don't have to expose that. Okay, this is personal stuff. But there are other sides of the practice that would benefit you and the patient or the client in the long run. And these practices are related to the open cultural practices and so on. For example, we often hear that there's a problem with doctors and probably psychologists. I don't know, but I know for sure that there's a problem with doctors. They don't share their mistakes. So there is a sort of a closure, okay? And it has two negative effects. One is that they don't share their mistakes with others so that others can avoid them. And second, they bear that heavy weight of making the mistakes on themselves, and they leave it within themselves without being able to talk about it, without being able to share it, to get it out in some sense. So it's a sort of a secret. Shit, I fucked up, okay, and I can't talk about it.
Well, it's partly related as well to culture, and there are different cultures in different countries. For example, with respect to probably doctors, psychologists, and other types of work like that, it's well known, I think, that the United States is a very litigious country. In other words, you cross your T's, dot your I's, and then do it all over again in case you get sued. And there are other countries that have laws as well. But I think that there's two issues. I absolutely agree that sharing negative aspects, negative feelings, all sorts of aspects like that is probably a very helpful thing. And I think also that probably in those professions compared to 20 years ago, I think there's ongoing, and again, some of this will be generational, some of it will be due to the internet and the creation of a lot more relatively rapidly communities where there's interaction between doctors, patients, and other kinds of care providers has started to change things an awful lot. And I also think because of the younger generation, there's more openness. For example, there's, I think, a lot more in the education of professionals, the sharing of anonymized cases in terms of case study work and so on. All of those, again, it's all these different shades of gray.
Openness and just, yes, sure, yeah.
The point is that the tide is moving in the right direction as opposed to more secrecy.
But what I'm trying to understand here is how can we help? Because we are gaining experience through our practices. Okay, let's say we saw something coming early on, and we jumped the boat and immersed ourselves into a new practice, into a new culture, right? But let's say we see stuff, and the idea is how can we help the others? Okay. See the benefits, because I believe if there is no benefit, that's what we're doing.
Well, I think that there's one very good vehicle, and it exists already, and I think it's already a monumental work, mainly thanks to Michel, and I don't know if you know James Burke. I don't know if he's still involved, but he lives in Amsterdam with the Peer Foundation and the Wiki. That's an immensely rich resource. I do think. This is really just my intuition and the little I know speaking, but the next challenge is as, this stuff, it keeps growing and more awareness keeps growing, our marketing challenges and then practical, making marketing meet practical opportunities. So, what does peer-to-peer mean when it comes to, there's a really interesting possibility, I think, there's all sorts of different medical communities now, usually focused around a given disease, whether it's diabetes or Alzheimer's or something. Well, here would be a challenge to people to think about peer-to-peer things, going into a community like that, which is mostly usually created sometimes by a hospital and doctors, sometimes by the relatives of the patients in order to share information. What would be additional useful, helpful, utilitarian peer-to-peer practices that could be offered to support those communities? Would they be some kinds of apps? Would they be, would it be, because I know you're interested in medical instruments, would it be starting to even do crowdsourcing of ideas for new kinds of medical tool applications that places like SENSORICA and other peer-to-peer open source places could build? I don't know, things like that. Asking good questions is always useful, and especially asking them into communities of interest.
I think it's already starting in some areas. For example, more and more websites give patients a place to speak to each other and share experiences. And you can provide that as an individual, as a practitioner, as a psychologist. Provide a space for your patients to just exchange their reality. And sometimes that creates a sort of a support among themselves, that you don't have to deal with. And then you can intervene. You can even see that and be more informed about what people see because you have more access to information than just doing the practice. I think there's a lot of things that we can just brainstorm and find that relates to the open culture and open practices and apply to a place where you think might not apply because of confidentiality.
I like about the open, about what open means, and it doesn't mean you run around and naked all the time. I think for me, it's like I feel like in baby shoes because I feel like I'm just learning just the basics of what the health peer-to-peer is and what open means and open culture. And right now, I'm in the midst of finishing my PhD, so my mind is not really there. But afterwards, there's stuff in the back of my mind where I'm thinking, how could I apply this to stuff that I may be doing in the future? So I guess it's a slow progress. Process.
I think mostly people learn their own pace, reflecting their own way, rather than being told and then saying you should understand this. It doesn't work. I do have to go. I have a little. Dis bonjour à tout le monde.
T'as pas fait du jeu, hein?
Mais oui, mais qu'il était bon, hein, comme very well behaved. It's time for him to have his tonton look after him now. Merci beaucoup pour l'opportunité. Sorry I spoke a lot, but
No, that's fine. This is why we're here to share.
Okay,
thanks, Sean.
Yeah, in the summers maybe it should be like SENSORICA Mondays or something.
Yeah. Sometimes we can't drink beer on Monday night, but
sure we can.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
say anything, but I'm listening to you. Okay. Bienvenue à Montréal. Nice to meet you, Sonia.
Bye.
See you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Have a question.
Okay, so let's ask.
Nice to meet you too. Salut, enchanté.
So? You're very well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Tiberius. It
Okay.
was really motivational.
Yeah, I think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sometimes think about stuff related to the subject and about economics too. I'm always thinking. Yeah, it was very motivational.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
We're
Well, we're
talk
going to do
more.
this every month, but or maybe, we're going to probably do one in 3 weeks or a month. But I don't know if we're still going to be here, but
Okay.
yeah.
No, okay.
You can connect like Bob and link to the
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Right on.
Thank you, Tibby.
Okay, so I'm gonna Lynn and Apostolis, would you like to contribute something or just okay.